Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new MDs. We are live today, October 28th, 2025. And this is episode, can I believe this is episode 34? Here we are again. But this is a special show today because we are bringing back one of the original new MDs of Mothers, Doctors, and Scientists, Dr. Fabulous Stephanie Seneff. Welcome, Dr. Stephanie Seneff.
Great to be back. Thank you.
And the reason why I am just so beyond ecstatic, there's her book. If you haven't picked it up, please pick it up, is because we're talking about one of my favorite topics. And this is ultra processed foods, or I like to call fake foods, autoimmunity, and the links on how these relate to the health of our children. But before we get into that, this is a special moment where Dr. Stephanie Seneff is going to talk about acromantia. And you say, acromancy, what? Yes, acromancy is a key microbe in our microbiome, and the links to glyphosate, we can't say that enough, and of course GLPs, and everyone's going to know what GLPs are if you don't already. Ozempic and every other TV commercial. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So the way today's program is going to be structured is Dr. Stephanie will do her thing first. You'll have an opportunity to please put questions in the chat. And then I'm going to begin a PowerPoint talk on the fake foods. So we have an action-packed podcast today. And Stephanie, take it away, my friend, and let's start with you.
Okay, thank you so much. I am so excited about this GLP-1 story. And I tell you, as soon as I heard about those GLP-1 analogs, I got worried. It's just sort of like what I felt with statin drugs. There's something wrong here that you have to take a hormone, imitation hormone as a shot. It just seems absolutely, dangerous, I would say, and doesn't make sense. And it worries me that so many people are taking these today, huge numbers and growing, and it's actually breaking the healthcare system because it's so expensive. We're going to see the health insurance go way up, I think, because of this. And no end in sight. And I am just really frustrated by it. So I've been interested in GLP-1. I've been looking into it ever since I heard about these imitation GLP-1 molecules that you take with a shot. And I always want to tie things back to glyphosate. And so what was interesting is I came across this microbe called Akkermansia mucophila. It might be musophila. I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Mucin loving.
Yeah, mucin loving, right? Akkermansia, and that's important because that's the only thing they eat is these muso. And the trouble is, I just learned that it's a C instead of a K, and I've been saying it with a K all the time, and so I get so discombobulated by it. But the sulfomucins, which I finally learned how to pronounce correctly. That are made by these cells in the colon, and those are the goblet cells. So these goblet cells make these sulfomucins. I'm going to say it enough times to get used to it, and then the Akkermansia eat it. That's all they eat, So it's really interesting that the gut is feeding them with these molecules, and the Akkermansia break them down into very small organic molecules like formate. And that is good news to the rest of the microbes because there's various microbes in the gut that are super important for turning that formate into carbon dioxide and hydrogen gas. And this is an anaerobic environment where they a reducing environment without oxygen, so it's and they produce this hydrogen gas, molecular hydrogen, which is super, super important, I believe, in the gut as a resource for deuterium depleted nutrients. And that's what we've talked about before. We had a whole show on deuterium. I'm super, super excited about deuteronomics, and I want to shout out to everybody, take a look at deuterium. It is so important. And I'm really convinced that pretty much all of our metabolism is obsessed on keeping deuterium out of the mitochondria. So this is my big story that I'm pushing these days and want to get out that message. And the gut microbes are really good at making deuterium depleted nutrients, most importantly, butyrate. And butyrate is manna from heaven for the colonocytes. They love it. So the microbes need that hydrogen gas to make acetate, which they then turn into butyrate. And these are these short chain fatty acids, acetate, propionate, and butyrate, that the microbes make that are so important for our health because I believe they're low in deuterium. And so the butyrate feeds the colonocytes are happy. they're healthy. They can make these sulfomucins, which then the Akkermansia eats. The Akkermansia makes the formate. Other microbes make the hydrogen gas, and you have a complete cycle. And that cycle is super, super important for health. And one thing about glyphosate that I feel very confident about, and I wrote about in my book, Toxic Legacy, glyphosate messes up the sulfation system. And so those sulfomucins are compromised by glyphosate. And that means that Akkermansia doesn't have enough to eat, so basically they don't do well. So I was thinking that kind of logic. I was thinking, I bet you that. I wonder if there's anything out there, in the research literature that might say that glyphosate suppresses Akkermansia, because I know it suppresses other microbes, and you're going to get into some of that later. Because there's a bunch of microbes who have this very essential protein that glyphosate suppresses, famously suppresses in the plants, which is this EPSP synthase in the shikimate pathway. The microbes have it. Some of them have a sensitive version of it, and Akkermansia is one of those that has a sensitive version. So I thought, let me see if I can find it. And I was so thrilled when I looked, and I think Anne could put my slides up now, and we'll just go straight to the story. Here we go. Prenatal exposure to dietary levels of glyphosate disrupts metabolic, immune, and behavioral markers across generations in mice. And this is a paper that's published in November 2025. So it hasn't even happened yet, but luckily it's available already on the web. A very recent paper. And this paper is fascinating. I read the whole thing, has a lot of data. And of course, part of that data is the Akkermansia story. So I have a couple more slides going into more detail from this paper. So, and you can move on to the next one. This is a picture. This is their a figure, or maybe it's their graphical abstract from this paper. So they have a very interesting study that they did. They had two kinds of mice, mice that were healthy in terms of making the sulfomucins, and mice that were not. So these guys had genetic problems with the making of the sulfomucins. And then they watched their offspring. They gave them low dose glyphosate below the regulatory limits. And then they followed their offspring. So these are their first and second generation offspring of these mice. And then they looked at the offspring to see what kind of issues they had. And they found a lot of issues. They found, of course, glucose clearance was down. Insulin resistance was up. That means they're headed towards diabetes. And here's this GLP-1. GLP-1 was down. So it suppressed GLP-1 production in these mice. That's the thing that those drugs that are so expensive are trying to correct for. And then it also disrupted their intestines, the goblet cells. So those are the ones that make those sulfomucins down. Inflammation, dysbiosis, all those problems up. So we know that about glyphosate. We have lots of evidence that it disrupts the gut and causes these things. And then also they had issues, cognitive issues in mobility and in working memory. So this is kind of like getting into autism, right? Had kind of autistic-like behaviors. So this is pretty amazing already to see this just this one chart. And now we can go to the next slide where they give their highlights. I believe here's the highlights. This is their highlights, so I'm just quoting them. And it's pretty powerful. First of all, it reshapes the gut, the metabolism, and the behavior across multiple generations. So that's pretty stunning already. And the harmful effects arise with extremely low doses, far beneath the current safety limits. This is the kind of dosage you're going to get in your food. Damage to the gut barrier, leaky gut, mucin loss because of those goblet cells being down, inflammation, all of that. In the F2 generation, that's the grandpups. And then glyphosate-linked microbiome shifts, disrupt endocrine and tryptophan pathways. Tryptophan is a product of that shikimate pathway. And then dose and generation-based host microbiome rewiring suggests inheritable gut-brain immune disruption. So when your grandmother is exposed to glyphosate when she's pregnant with your mother, you're going to have problems because of that, even if you don't have any more glyphosate after that. So this is, I think, really, really stunning. And now we have the next slide, which is where we get into the Akkermansia. Okay, here you go. Akkermansia muciniphila. Muciniphila, I'm going to get that. It was depleted. And then this other one, Parabacteroides species, and this one, which I won't even try to pronounce, were enriched. I don't know about these two guys. I need to look into more about exactly what they do. But the interesting thing is that the Akkermansia abundance correlates with the GLP-1 levels. And this is pretty good, statistically significant at 0.01 level. And then this other species showed significant negative correlation. So in other words, when you've got a lot of that guy that glyphosate promotes, you have low GLP-1. This is just correlation. Correlation doesn't mean causation. These findings suggest that prenatal glyphosate exposure, even below regulatory thresholds, may disrupt multiple physiological systems across generations, highlighting the need for further research and potential regulatory consideration. Now, these are just really powerful words that these people are saying. I'm thrilled to see this paper because I'm hoping, I've seen really a trend in recent years of more and more papers coming out showing glyphosate in its true colors. And I really hope that eventually science will get to the bottom of exactly why glyphosate is so toxic. And I still believe, I will say this again, that it's because it can substitute for glycine during protein synthesis. I think that is absolutely crucial. It is causing a tremendous disruption of certain proteins that are highly sensitive. And that is what's making a lot of problems. Of course, the gut microbiome is sensitive, and that makes sense. And maybe that's the whole story, but I don't think so. We'll see, we don't know yet. The popular weight loss drug Wegovy is a GLP-1 analog. And so that's the thing, that these drugs that are so popular with people today are being used. They're actually the result of the lack of GLP-1 is what's causing both the diabetes and the obesity. And these drugs treat diabetes and obesity. So now we can go to the next slide. A newly identified protein from Akkermansia muciniphila stimulates GLP-1 secretion. That's one paper. Here's another one. Akkermansia secretes a glucagon-like peptide-1 inducing protein that improves glucose homeostasis and ameliorates metabolic disease. So these both are about the fact that Akkermansia promotes the GLP-1 production, which is consistent with what they saw in that paper. It was higher when there was Akkermansia, it was higher. And so there's a lot of papers coming out about how wonderful Akkermansia are as far as their ability to improve the gut system. And so this is just two examples to show you that these papers are out there. And now we can go on to the next slide. So this is what I was looking for, the prevalence. And I was really shocked when I'd seen some numbers coming by about how many people are actually taking these drugs today. And this was a poll published in May 10th, 2024. 1 in 8 adults say they have taken a GLP-1 drug, including 4 in 10 of those with diabetes and 1 in 4 of those with heart disease. So apparently they even are taking it for heart disease, diabetes, heart disease, and certainly obesity. People are taking these drugs. And so this is, I think, really worrisome. And GLP-1 analogs have been shown to have problems with the eyes. And so I think that's really scary. You don't want to mess with your eyes. And then half of those who were taking it said it was difficult to afford even with insurance. And I know people who had it, who were taking it with insurance coverage, and then the insurance was whisked away. Like at a certain point, they say, no, we're not going to fund this anymore. Then they have to get off of it, or because they can't afford it. And then they gain the weight right back, and they gain more fat. They lose their protein, they gain fat. And their ultimate situation after that process is worse than they were before they started. So I think I am really worried about the GLP-1 situation, and I really want to get to the bottom of why we have this problem. And I think it really hits hard on glyphosate as a potential source of the trouble. And I think I have a couple of more slides here that are just these are just the charts. These are from way back, and Nancy Swanson and I collaborated for many years. I'm proud of the work we did. We published many papers with lots of figures like these. And I'm just going to show 2 here, which is diabetes and obesity. But we have probably, I don't know, maybe 40 different slides of perfect correlation between glyphosate and X, where X is some disease. It's like pretty amazing, including, for example, vitamin D deficiency, sleep disorder. I mean, there's a lot of things that we've seen. And these 2, we can go back to the other one just for a moment, just to show a little bit more. This is the glyphosate, the red. The blue is GMO around soy and corn crops going up over time. 1995 here, you can see from 1980 to 1995, not much happening. And then you've got all this rise in diabetes, incidence of diabetes, age adjusted up to 2010, which is when we stopped at 2010. It got difficult to continue beyond that date because the data became sparse. The government has kind of not done as good a job. And I don't know, I haven't looked recently. Maybe there's some more data now, but we got frustrated with trying to push our charts beyond 2010. You can show the next slide, which is the obesity, and that's death from obesity. You want to just move it? Oh yeah, here we go. Very similar look, right? And so obesity also going up dramatically, exactly in step with the rise in diabetes. They're linked, obesity is a risk factor for diabetes, and glyphosate is, I think, a risk factor for both obesity and diabetes. And maybe this GLP-1 problem is a core feature of how to explain that. And GLP-1 is actually interesting. I looked at what it actually does. And GLP-1 goes to the pancreas, and it stimulates the release of insulin from the pancreas. And when GLP-1 is low, the insulin stays inside those beta cells, and then it can actually form, it can cause a misfolding of a protein that is prion-like. And so really interesting stuff. And then that prion-like misfolding is associated with diabetes. So there's some more dots to connect there. The story is really fascinating. And I think we're starting to close in on the kill. So I'm really excited about all of this. And I think that's pretty much the end of my talk. And
well, that's a whirlwind. Well, first of all, thank you for presenting that. And what so many supplement companies are now doing to offset this issue, because now integrative practitioners are aware that people are low in Akkermansia, because you can test people's stool and they're extremely low. So they're giving them Akkermansia supplements, probiotic. Well, that sounds like a great fix, right? But we're not removing the root cause, which is glyphosate. So and it's, yes, we can all switch to our diets to organic regenerative, but we need to systematically, globally, remove the glyphosate, these toxic chemicals, and not with more toxic, pesticides.
I know. That's what I'm afraid of. We're just going to have glufosinate and 2,4-D
and other
dicamba.
But so it has to be a shift. You can't band-aid this problem. And I thank you for bringing up the point about for people who've been on GLPs, they lose a significant amount of muscle mass. And then when they're off the GLP, they regain it as fat.
They have such a terrific appetite. They just can't stand not to eat. It's just truly amazing once they're off. So that's also very interesting. It's a reaction. It's one of those drugs that has a
rebound phenomenon
reaction. That's like a withdrawal side effect of the drug.
And I just wanted to share that drug runs about $1,200 a month.
That's
and
crazy.
Medicare, it's going to bankrupt Medicare, because now Medicare offers it. And it's no surprise that so many Americans are taking it, because the rate of obesity in Americans for children, it's about 1 in 5. For adults, it might be 1 in 3.
Yeah, it's just gone up and up and up. It's just amazing. And all around the world, I've actually looked at various countries, like in Africa. I looked at the countries in Africa, and most of them don't have an obesity problem at all. The ones that do are the ones that are exposed to the glyphosate contaminated food. It's the Mediterranean coast where they get a lot of imported foreign foods, fast foods, and then South Africa, which uses a lot of glyphosate.
They were the first country to use GMOs, even before us. I don't know if that was known, but they've been on the GMO bandwagon right in step with us. And we started about approximately 1996, when, as per your beautiful graphs with Nancy Swanson, show the uptick. Was when we introduced GMOs, and then the unabashed use of glyphosate, because they were glyphosate tolerant crops, soy, corn, canola, etc., skyrocketed.
Yeah, and they got the resistant weeds, and that problem has gotten worse and worse, and that's why the glyphosate usage kept going up, because you had to hit them harder to kill them. And now it's become so bad that they can't kill some of these weeds with glyphosate, so they mix other things in there. And that's that whole dicamba problem that's happening in the Midwest, where they have these dicamba resistant crops that are also glyphosate resistant. And then they have this formulation that has both dicamba and glyphosate. And the dicamba gets into the neighbor's crop and kills it, because the neighbor doesn't have the GMO resistance. And then there's all these lawsuits from the farmers to their neighbors. You killed my crop with your dicamba, because and you have to buy the GMO resistant dicamba crop. Even if you're not going to use the dicamba, you got to buy it to protect it from your neighbor.
So this is what we've been screaming about, Stephanie. I'd say I've been doing it about 25 years now.
You've been doing it longer than I have. You beat me.
We've been at it a bit. But it doesn't mean we're going to stop. And I also agree with you. We're in for the kill, because it's becoming really clear what the mechanisms are regarding these paths to the use of glyphosate and immune dysregulation via the dysbiosis being the number one. But I'm going to go into my talk, the other factors which make glyphosate so incredibly toxic. Before we pivot into part 2 of this amazing New MDs podcast, if there are this is live stream. We are just winging it. Here are the links. We're just going. If there are any questions that I see comments, thank you everybody who's listening in. Of course, we'll have this available as a recording on various platforms. We'll give you all that.
Oh, that's so sad.
And that our amazing producer Ann Temple keeps us honest with all that.
Yeah, I like this. I'm sorry, I'm reading these things at the bottom.
I know. So thank you, Stephanie. You're welcome to stay on, because I am going to get into part 2 now. And Anne is going to put my slides up for me so I don't have to be technologically challenged. So this is part 2, and I really want to get into, I say the weeds for fake food kids and the path to autoimmunity, which is ever rising. Next slide. So what I want to talk about is what's happening in children. I want to give you definitions. Please feel free to take screenshots. This talk will go up on GMO Science, by the way, and you can have access to the talk later. Nutritional deficiencies, I'm going to talk about additives. I want to talk about specifically how they affect our kids. And then because we are solutionaries, strategies and calls to action arise off the couch. Next, please. So I'm going to give you the then and now, what's happening with kids and autoimmune disease. I've pulled a few diseases that are very concerning for me and a few snapshots. You are not all going to become experts on in autoimmune disease, but I want you to get peppered with some information. And the first one I talk about is inflammatory bowel disease. You may have heard of Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And we know they've been over the past 50 years increasing. It's not super common, but it's rising, particularly in kids under 20, 25%. We know there's a strong role of environmental factors. We know that it has to do with a diet, which is linked to inflammation. And we know that dysbiosis is a major factor. And there's a lot of literature on that with these decreased butyrate producers. And that's what you heard Dr. Stephanie talking about prior to this. Next, please. Type 1 diabetes is an awful disease for children. It's not super common, but 3 to 4% increase over the last 3 decades, about 18,000 kids annually. That's 18,000 too many. Again, we know genetics with dysbiosis, with environmental causes, decreasing butyrate producers. And we are not the leading country, but India is. They have a much larger population than we do. And as these other countries switch to our types of diets, they are seeing our types of problems. But there's the US right up there, Brazil and China coming in, bringing up the rear. So this is a global issue, not a US issue. Next, please. We have to talk about celiac disease because this is super common, 1 in 100 kids globally. We know autoimmunity in genetically susceptible people arising from gluten ingestion, and we know the gluten has changed, or the wheat rather, pardon, has changed in the US, and we've made a way more toxic wheat. So we've hybridized it. It's not GMO yet, but GMO wheat is coming. It's literally knocking on the door, people. Just don't eat it. And so this wheat product has a lot of lectins. Lectins don't make you feel good, but these folks often have a genetic predisposition, but not all. We can actually see celiac disease in people who don't have the genetic disposition. And what's at the bottom? Dysbiosis. And you say, Dr. Para, what are you showing us in that little growth chart? If you have a child or a grandchild, you've seen these growth charts. When kids start to fall off in height and weight, this one is height for girls, you'll see we have to think of celiac disease. You take them off gluten and they start growing again. Kids stop growing when they have a chronic disease. It's a hallmark of something going on. Next, please. So, you know I like timelines. Well, if you didn't know that, I do. There's the gluten. There's the dysbiosis. There's the genetic susceptibility for those of you interested. And then they get immune activation. I'm going to show you what that villus atrophy looks like. And what villus atrophy means is that the little finger-like projections that are lining your intestinal lining that look like a towel, the folds on a towel, increase absorption of nutrients. That's where you do it. And they start to get flat. So they don't absorb nutrients very well. And hence pediatric celiac disease, not a benign condition. Next, please. So when we see, this is the incidence of celiac disease over ages by country. And we're up there. We're not the highest, but we are certainly up there. Oh, no, pardon, we are the highest. I thought first Canada was higher. It's not. We are the highest. And when we see a curve like that, this is not a genetics. Genetics don't change that quickly over time. As clinicians, we think infectious diseases. But you say, wait a minute, is this infectious disease? Well, I challenge you to think about whether dysbiosis is an infectious disease with an overgrowth of certain pathogens, I call them pathobionts, and a reduction in the beneficial microbes. And that's what people like Dr. Seneff and I and Zen Honeycutt, the mom of the new MDs, and so many of us have been screaming about for decades. Next, please. And last but not least, I want to talk about asthma. Common, not normal. And this slide's a little bit old, said 1 in 12 kids, much higher. It can be anywhere from 1 in 5 to 1 in 12 kids, depending where the kid lives, their socioeconomic status, their ethnicity, much higher in Black children, much higher in urban children. And asthma should actually be called ASD, or asthmatic syndrome disorder, like autism, because we're starting to consider asthma as part of autoimmunity. And I pull out this paper. I really like this paper. You can see on a lot of my slides, I've linked to the studies. So you know this is not from the Journal of Juju Medicine, but I'm actually looking at the data where it says, I love this, that you can actually see autoantibodies and autoimmunity in some asthma patients, particularly the ones with severe asthma, as parts of a spectrum of immunologic phenomenon. And it can go on in the paper, but I just want to say this is how we're starting to think of asthma, where sick is the new normal. Next, please. Hence, summary, all autoimmune diseases in children are rising. We don't want to treat them. We want to prevent them. And can we prevent them? At the end of this talk, I say yes, 100%. There's the list of the most common ones. And if you notice, they're not in order, by the way, of the most common. I just listed them all. You'll see I put autism up there because there is evidence that autism is a autoimmune disease of the brain, and something called PANDAS, which is a neuroautoimmune disease in children from strep infections, but it also can be from other infections like Lyme disease and co-infections. There's something called maternal immune activation. And when mom's immune systems are activated, that can induce autoimmunity in children. And I gave you a link for the study and a little graph there for those of you who are graphic learners. So we don't want to treat autoimmune disease. You can in the integrative space. Prevention. Next, please. So summing it up, how I'd like to think about, what are we seeing? What are the other underlying factors across these childhood autoimmune diseases and immune-mediated diseases? And I've listed them there. We're seeing a disruption of the gut barrier called leaky gut or intestinal permeability. We're seeing dysbiosis, which is the abnormal microbiome. You've heard lots about it, where we have lower levels of beneficial bacteria and short-chain fatty acid producers like butyrate, acetate, propionate. Those are the main ones. We get immune dysregulation. We know there are dietary triggers. We know there are nutritional deficiencies. And we know that there is gut brain microbiome access crosstalk. There's gut lung microbiome crosstalk. There is gut heart crosstalk. So everything, this microbiome is really the director of this symphony. And so when there's harm to the microbiome, it affects all other biologic systems. Genetic susceptibility matters. It's not the driving force. So when you have a genetically susceptible child, environmental and dietary insults, you get subsequent dysbiosis, you get leaky gut, you get immune dysregulation, you get uploaded inflammation, chronic inflammation, and then you can get organ-specific autoimmunity. If it affects the pancreas, it's diabetes. If it affects a joint, it might be rheumatoid arthritis, a juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And if it affects the brain, it might look like autism. Next, please. So now, I want to bring into what I've been talking about is fake food. And I call this industrial food-like products. I picked my 3 favorite targets. There are many. And what is ultra-processed food? Let me define it for you. It's made from refined ingredients and additives, lacks nutritional value, and linked to inflammation, metabolic disorders, and autoimmune conditions. My favorites are GMOs, the Impossible Burger. I think we've ragged on the Impossible Burger ad nauseum, but I'll rag a little bit further today. And I'm going to tell you about biomilk with a Q, which is fake breast milk. Next, please. So let's start with the ultra-processed foods. I think there's no one in America who hasn't seen these little Lunchables. My kids used to love them, like go and get a Lunchable. And I'm going to be honest. When my kids were little, I thought it was occasionally okay to give them a Lunchable. Now, that was 30 years ago, people. So that's what they are. I'm not going to go through every one of these categories, but I want to pull out a few key factors. Minimal whole ingredients, if any. Tons of additives, including pollutants. Pollutants are things that the companies put in the foods to get you addicted. Various ratios, very finely studied ratios of salts, fats, and sugar. So therefore, they are engineered for you to overconsume them and to become addicted to them. The examples, if you're an American, you know what they are, and you can see the health concerns. They are linked to inflammation and all the things that we're talking about today. So there's the overview, and I think Americans are familiar with this. Next, please. But what did we in our wisdom in 2024 want to do? We said, oh, let's bring Lunchables into school lunches, because as Zen Honeycutt and Moms Across America showed in their landmark school lunch study, kids eating school lunches in America, 30 million meals per day. They might as well be eating cardboard. But anyway, school lunches, we were going to serve them every day until, thank you, Consumer Reports said, oh, wait, high levels of lead and sodium in these Lunchables, not to mention the 50 toxic ingredients I put in there. And so Kraft Heinz, pulled them off the shelf. They also were going to serve Impossible Burger in school lunches as well. So thank you for Consumer Reports for getting that information out there as well. Next, please. So in some ultra-processed foods, what do? They cause dysbiosis and damage the mucosa barrier. And this dysbiotic microbiome cannot sustain regulatory immune signaling. It's prone to inflammatory metabolites. I'm going to talk about that. And injury to the lining of the gut lining. And as this barrier weakens, the microbial products, many of them are toxic for us, and food antigens, which are foreign proteins because we haven't fully broken them down, they leak across the gut membrane into our circulation. And then your immune system sitting on the other side, two parts of it, innate and adaptive, are looking at it and saying, oh, attack. And they start creating immune responses to this. And this priming can tip over self-tolerance, and we no longer recognize we recognize these as non-self, and we start attacking our own tissues, autoimmunity, and we trigger autoimmune disease, or we exacerbate existing autoimmune disease. Next, please. So Governor Newsom, in his wisdom, signs the first in the nation law to ban ultra-processed foods from school lunch. Bravo, Governor Newsom. I'm going to give him this one. I love it. So I'm thinking to myself, so we should give children in the state of California 72 mandated various things, which I can't say, otherwise we get booted off YouTube. But then we could at least give them a clean lunch and not ultra-processed foods. So interesting kind of paradox there in my mind, but I digress. Let's move on, Anne, please. So I had to put this up there. I watched this YouTube and oh God, and it's fake beef and lamb chops being rice made from plastic. And this video came out of a leaked video in China. Boy, everyone should watch that YouTube when a Friday night you got nothing going on, and to have a watch this. It's only 20 minutes. Yeah, you'll think twice about eating out. Next, please. So I just want to, you've heard about GMOs, like I think a million times between Dr. Stephanie and myself and so many others. But I just wanted to sum up what Dr. Pusey, the first scientist to study GMOs, he found, and why GMOs got linked in my fake food top 3. And so you have to know that the only reason why we eat GMOs, the only reason they're engineered to tolerate the spraying of glyphosate-based herbicides. That's it. And they are allergic, they have endocrine disruption, they cause dysbiosis, they cause reproduction errors, they cause cancer. They're a mess. And we know that. And it's this cocktail. GMOs are bad, Roundup is bad, glyphosate-based herbicides, and together they're worst. I don't want to go through the whole slide, but I want to pull out 2 important things about GMOs. There are nutrient alterations. A GMO corn is not the same as its organic equivalent, even as its conventional. Even of a conventional crop that's not GMO corn, they're still not equivalent. GMOs are not equivalent nutrient-wise as other crops that are non-GMO. People should understand that. GMOs themselves disrupt gut bacteria. You have to appreciate that these little promiscuous bacteria, oh indeed, they swap plasmids, little pieces of DNA, with the microbes in your gut, having microbial sex. Yes, and then we become genetically modified. And in theory, we are now owned by Monsanto Bayer because we are genetically modified. How about that? Chew on that for a minute. We have environmental concerns, we have safety concerns, and we're all eating this stuff with minimal data on humans. There's minimal data on humans and the effects of GMOs. Let's go on. I saw this slide and you say, oh my God, why is she showing histopathology slides? We're not medical students. No, you're not. But everyone viewing this slide can appreciate the difference between in the intestinal lining, those little villus folds that I was talking about earlier that are blunted in celiac disease. There's non-GMO villi and there's GMO-fed villi. And you can see there's a disruption in the architecture. When I first saw this slide in 2003, I paired that with what was happening in our children with the uptick in autism and dysbiosis and gut problems. And it all happened in the early 2000s. And that's when I saw this slide and literally Broadway moment, bells, big finale. I literally pivoted on the spot. Look at the stomach lining, non-GMO, and look, increased growth in the GMO-fed rats. And you say, isn't that good? Oh no, that's called hyperplasia. And hyperplasia is a precursor to cancer, stomach cancer. So let's move on. Just cement that picture. I just wanted to show you the various plant-based burgers out there and just plain old ground beef from grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And you can see that beef just looks better. Now, I'm not talking about vegetarians and meat eaters and carnivores. I'm just showing you the basic calorie counts, salt. And so in terms of sodium content, because that seemed to be a thing that Consumer Reports pulled out, why we're feeding our children Lunchables, you can see just grass-fed, grass-finished beef fared much better in terms of sodium. Look at that little Beyond Burger. And these are not all genetically modified, only the Impossible Burger is, but the other ones are plant-based. And we're going to get into some of these plant-based burgers in a minute. Next, please. So let's talk about those plant-based burgers. I want to introduce you to the Impossible Foods CEO, Peter McGinnis, and he said that the reason why the stock market is kind of plummeting on Impossible Foods and these little Impossible Burgers is because it was climate-based marketing. And that's what he says. Not that people don't want to eat these little nasty GMO burgers that produce 44 novel proteins that your body's never seen before, but because it was a marketing mistake. Well, Mr. McGinnis, and you may want to reconsider that. Next, please. Now let's look at that Beyond Meat. That was Bill Gates's little product there. And when it first came out, Beyond Meat, it's a plant-based fake food, which I'll show you in a minute. His stock was initially valued at $8 billion. It's basically worth this now. And I'm just sharing with you that they're promoting these things and we're not buying. So remember the power of the purse, economic tipping point. Hats off to you, my friend Jeffrey Smith, for teaching me about that. The fake meat industry does not have a consumer appetite. Stop feeding this stuff. We don't want to eat it. We want real food. And I'm going to take you further down the rabbit hole with me. It's called rabbit hole-itis. Next, please. So I want to show you this one study. It literally just came out, and then we'll move on. Key findings from the UK Biobank study on plant-based meat alternatives. And I want to pull out one thing, that plant-based meat alternative consumers had a 42% higher risk of depression in this particular study. I gave you the study and where I read the summary of the study. I think it was from Slay News. And so you can either read Slay News quick article or the actual study. And so I don't want to delve too much into this, but it has some health challenges that I would be concerned about. Next, please. So I'm going to pivot for a second into BioMilk with a Q and introduce you to these two gals. They were both scientists in Atlanta who had trouble breastfeeding. And so with some startup money from Bill Gates, first there was 3 million, then another 21 million, they created a lab-based breast milk, synthetic breast milk from a mammary epithelial cell, which is the lining of the mammary glands. And so you might say, oh, what a great idea. Well, is it? There's nothing the same as actual breast milk. Breast milk is an unequal best food for babies, and I think there's no one can argue with that. But what about this lab-based breast milk? Is this good enough? Well, it doesn't have a dynamic nutrient adaptation like breast milk. That's clear. Neither does infant formula, folks. So as the baby changes, the breast milk changes. Babies and mom are in constant communication. When baby has a certain need, it through retrograde flow, it through the microbes in the baby's mouth, it tells mom what it needs. Mom whips that up in the kitchen, aka her body, and sends it back to baby. Beautiful. Processing concerns. It's produced using biotechnology, and there's every issue from a lab's perspective: contamination, processing chemicals, genetic modifications. It doesn't have the microbes in breast milk. It can introduce new allergens like the Impossible Burger. No long-term safety data. There are ethical, regulatory concerns. And why don't we direct this $24 million into nursing moms and lactation support, Mr. Gates? That's what I'd like to know. Next, please. So what's happened with BioMilk? Well, this came out this year, and they filed for bankruptcy. Was it because they realized that their product was a bust? No, because there was a cranky divorced dad in there that made one of the mom's lives miserable, and they had to crashed it. So it was over the divorced dad and not over some ethical revelation that this wasn't the best things for babies, and that their product, which was going to reduce carbon emissions, that's what they claimed. But right now it's bankrupt, but doesn't mean it's not going to come back knocking on the door. That's why I introduced this idea to you. Next, please. So this is what concerns me. And this is what I'm thinking about when I go to sleep. Are breast milk and breastfeeding to be replaced by a motherboard? Is this where we're heading in 1984, George Orwellian kind of babies in little cages, plastic cages? Next, please. So I'm going to move on into cellular meat. If you need to take a break, folks, go get a drink of water, do some laundry, go pick up your kids, whatever you need to do. This is there for when you get back. I'm just saying. Okay, I want to talk about 3D printed meat because that's what it looks like in that picture. And you say, what is she talking about? 3D printed meat? Well, let me explain what this is. It's out there. It's out there now, and it's not labeled because we don't label GMOs. We don't label printed meat. We don't label any of it. We don't learn appeal, APEEL. We don't label that either. So it has processing additives, scaffolding materials. What the heck is that? Contaminants, growth media. The nutritional composition varies, especially fatty acids, vitamins, minerals. There are hormonal and growth factor concerns. They use growth factors and hormones to stimulate the cell growth. And we know that growth factors work at very low levels. Even parts per trillion can affect our hormone system. There are structural and functional differences in the collagen and the connective tissue. There are microbial contamination risk, allergy and immune response risk, and environmental and ethical concerns regarding the animals used. And I will show you what those are. Next, please. So no, don't freak out. I'm not going through all these companies. I'm going to pull out a few of all the lab-grown meat companies popping up all over the world. For example, in Delaware, you can get pet food that's lab-grown. You can get from China, Cell X, Wagyu beef. And of course, we need eel meat from 4 Seafoods in Israel. Next, please. Oh, what foie gras from Gourmet in France. We all need that. And look, Integriculture from Japan says you can get space salt, where the public can grow their own meat at home. In Israel and Belgium, you can get foie gras with 3D bioprinting technology. Fabulous. And then, of course, for those of you who need to eat bush meat, you can get lab-grown lion, zebra, and tiger, because we all need to be eating bush meat. Sushi grade seafood from San Francisco, my hometown. Next, please. I had to pull out this article. There are over 30 countries with this lab meat, 200 companies Hello. The US has over 50 companies. I couldn't believe this, accounting for more than 20% of the total. And we have to acquire animal cells. We have to develop cell lines. You have to improve cell proliferation. You have to improve the efficacy of cell differentiation and muscle production and develop cell culture media that's serum free. And these are the themes related to the development of cultured meat. Next, please. And this is the process. This article goes on to say meat produced in this manner can help address the challenges facing global food systems related to climate change, buzzword, food safety, food security, and animal welfare. So, is this better for our animals? Let's look. We take stem cells harvested from the animal. I'm going to show you how we grow meat. You have to take their muscle or an embryo cell. How benign is that? You grow it in a culture medium on a petri dish. Then you transfer it to a bioreactor. Then you grow it on this 3D edible frame, and there, voila, your burger, your delicious looking burger. Next, please. So they say it offsets climate change. Well, this paper came out of UC Davis, and the scientists said they defined global warming potentials, carbon dioxide equivalents emitted for each kilogram of meat produced. And this study came out a couple of years ago from UC Davis said global warming potential lab-based meat using these purified media is 4 to 25 times greater than the average for retail beef. Okay, climate change. Well, climate change, folks, maybe you want to have a look at that study. And Mr. Gates maybe needs to have a look at that study. Next, please. They now say that it's halal, it's kosher, it's vegetarian, it's humane. This company says we begin by sourcing the best cells from the best chickens and cows. We painlessly, really, extract cells from an egg or living animal. The halal meat market, I read that from this article and I said, really? Okay. Is this really ethical and humane? And I call into question that myself. Next, please. I'm an animal lover. Oh, go Italy becomes the first nation to ban Bill Gates' fake meat. Thank you, our Italian friends. And that's why we do so well when we're Italy eating Italian food. They are on it. Next, please. So I want to get into the final, I think the final part of the symphony. And now I want to talk how all this matters in terms of the impact on our children's well-being. And I worry about our children's immunologic future, all our children. And so I start with the patent. All of you know it. Glyphosate was patented as an antibiotic, a very effective antibiotic in 2010. Thank you, Monsanto. Now there. But what you may not know is the following. This is my theory. It's not been proven, but it's my theory, and I'm going to develop it with you. So there is a very important keystone microbe in our gut called Bacteroides fragilis. And Bacteroides fragilis is an important microbe. Many are important. It's very important, like the Akkermansia that you heard about from Dr. Stephanie earlier. And B. fragilis, I'll just say B. fragilis, folks, is sensitive to glyphosate. There's the paper. Now, vitamin D, the all-important hormone in vitamin D, acts through B. fragilis and a bacterial ecosystem to stimulate immunity. What that means is vitamin D needs B. fragilis to get activated to its active form. We know that vitamin D and autoimmunity, as well as cancer, folks, are linked. Next, people. Oh, next slide, Anne. I'm not going to go into this, but I wanted you to take a slide shot. And for those of you who want to geek out on this, I wrote the science out on how it happens. Vitamin D as an immune regulator, how you prevent autoimmunity, and what happens with autoimmunity and cancer. So please, folks, for those of you want to know the mechanism of how it happens, I'm going to go into a little bit now, but I laid it out for the geeks listening today. That would be us and Dr. Sedef. Next, please. For our visual learners, I just want to show you how vitamin D guards against autoimmunity and cancer. Excuse the typo. I was brushing this morning, but there you have immune regulation, effect on vitamin D, anti-cancer, autoimmunity effects. And I just wanted to show you how vitamin D promotes these T regulatory cells, what I'm going to talk about more, which dampen the autoimmune response and dampens inflammation. And it suppresses a part of our immune system called T helper 1 and T helper 17 cells, which also are inflammatory. And this is something that vitamin D does. So, we so little is done in mainstream medicine, but vitamin D support is rampant through the integrative community. And I even think it's in the cancer community well, because I know some oncologists who use vitamin D in their cancer patients. But we'd rather not have to treat again. We want to prevent. Next, please. So I want to put it together for you how glyphosate is an antibiotic, reduces beneficial bacteria like B. fragilis. B. fragilis is crucial for maintaining gut integrity, regulates immune tolerance, and reduces inflammation. And I just want to let you know that we've used B. fragilis in treatment of autism, and we've known that since 2013. There's another paper that you see those slide down there, and that's the effect of glyphosate on a Lactobacillus species. There's a control, and there's glyphosate. And that was after 48 hours. Next, please. For those of you into anti-aging medicine, vitamin D often also increases the telomere length, which is one of the foci of anti-aging medicine, is increasing your telomere length. I just wanted to throw that in there because some of you don't really care about children, but you might care about how you age. So I stuck that in there about the importance of vitamin D. Next, please. So I want to talk a little bit more about how B. fragilis impacts immune function. It produces a polysaccharide called PSA, which modulates something called T regulatory cells. And you need those T regulatory cells to prevent autoimmunity. And so again, I'm showing you from this paper, there were two groups of rats. There were germ-free rats, and then there were rats that expressed this polysaccharide PSA from B. fragilis. And one had an imbalance of its immune system between T helper 1 and T helper 2 cells, and one it was balanced. So when those rats who didn't have the expression of this PSA from B. fragilis had immune imbalance, which leads to autoimmunity. Next, please. So again, I think I've said this every way I can. Vitamin D, I have listed all the papers there for each one of those issues, has been shown to support pediatric panses, juvenile idiopathic arthritis, type 1 diabetes, systemic lupus, multiple sclerosis, dermatomyositis, and alopecia areata. And I just wrote the dosing down there because people often ask me, how much should I give my kid? Vitamin D3 needs to be paired with K2. Many pediatric formulations don't come that way. I don't know why they don't, but they should. But I'm going to show you in other ways to up your vitamin D. Next, please. Sunlight. I know this is Dr. Stephanie's favorite topic. Now, many of us don't live near in the sun, or we're heading to winter months now. It doesn't take a lot of sunlight to produce 5,000 international units of, that's 5,000, by the way, of vitamin D. And that's all it takes. But again, we are heading to the dark time of the year. It depends where you live. If you're on the other side of the planet in Australia, you're just entering your summer. If you're in Argentina, but the rest of us, our sun exposure is going down. So we may need to supplement with vitamin D. Next, please. So putting it all together, vitamin D deficiency is linked to autoimmune disease. Glyphosate's disruption of gut bacteria and vitamin D metabolism exacerbate vitamin D deficiency, further increasing the autoimmune risk. The earth is not dying, it is being killed. And those who are killing it have names and addresses, and I might add IP addresses. Next. So we know, again, many ways how we say this. It causes glyphosate. You just want to remember, glyphosate itself contributes to leaky gut, which allows various toxicants against the bloodstream. This triggers inflammation, often associated with gut dysbiosis and reduced B. fragilis. I think I made this point. Let's move on. Next, please. And I just put this together in a graph to show you what this looks like. For those of you who want to see it this way, the action of vitamin D, the microbial immune effect, and the glyphosate consequence. I just put it in a graph form for those of you who learn better that way. Next, please. So now I want to get into the second crucial part of this paper. You heard all about B. fragilis and vitamin D. Now I have to talk about what cofactors, mineral cofactors, you need for vitamin D activation. Now, if you look at this list, magnesium, zinc, boron, calcium, iron, copper, selenium, you may say, I know you guys have talked about how glyphosate, its first job was as a metal chelator. That means it binds metals. Which ones? All of these. Oh, yeah. It makes these metals unavailable for vitamin D activation. So if you have glyphosate on board and you are getting enough sunlight and you do eat a great diet, but you've got glyphosate, it will tie up these key mineral nutrients that you need to activate vitamin D. Vitamin D is activated in your skin and then in your kidney from an inactive form to an active form. And we're not going into what each one of these does, but I put up one thing I want you to be aware of. Many of us are boron deficient. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But boron, I'm just throwing this out there, helps internal terrain resist technological intrusion. I'm going to leave it at that and let you guys imagine what I'm implying by that. But let's move on. So glyphosate and phosphoenolmethylglycine binds minerals and it disrupts gut microbiota, reduces B. fragilis, interferes with vitamin D metabolism, binds these key minerals, collectively promoting inflammation, immune dysregulation, increasing the risk of autoimmune disease. And that is the house that Jack built. So that is what is happening. We know that it's happening. And we also know that if vitamin D is normal, appears normal on your lab data, you can have a functional deficiency if you are mineral depleted. And we know that many children now, when we check their minerals, they're extremely low. When Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America looked at the nutrient levels in those school lunches, they were abysmal, so low, those kids might as well have been eating cardboard. Next, please. I put this paper in, and this was the summary from Dr. Stephanie's paper, but I wanted to include just the other microbe in there. It's not just B. fragilis, it's Akkermansia, it's bifidobacteria, it's lactobacilli, and it promotes the growth of Clostridium species high in kids in the spectrum, as well as Salmonella and other pathogens. We've known that since 2013 with the work out of Germany in the Vet Science by Dr. Monica Kruger and her team in Germany. Next, please. So what we have as a result is a breakdown of the microbiome, mineral, mucosal ecosystem that underpins immune tolerance in children. And this is breaking down by what we're eating. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Next, please. And what are we also witnessing is the shift of centralizing control of our food supply in the hands of private corporations. And you've seen who they are. Oh, we just show them to you. Compromising nutrition, long-term safety, agricultural sustainability, and it's imperative that we medical practitioners, humans, eaters, consumers, teachers, legislators are aware of the implications for public health, metabolic health, gut microbiome health, immune health, and the overall well-being of our most vulnerable. Next, please. So, okay, now that I've depressed everyone, but no, we have solutions. And I want to start going through, I have an 8-step solution program, and it's super simple, and let's just go through it. Next, please. So 1, organic regenerative diet. When I first started on this journey, I just said organic. Now I say organic regenerative. The soil has to be resuscitated. There's our labels that I look for, and we encourage the consumption of organic foods whenever we can. And we have to emphasize whole, unprocessed foods. So getting away from these ultra-processed foods, eating straight from the garden, farmers markets, farm to table as much as we can. Food should be prepared in our own homes. Next, please. We have to support organic regenerative agriculture. Look at sales of organic food in the US from 2001 to 2021. Yes, and if you don't think that these companies don't see this trend up, they're seeing the same graphs we are. So we had to advocate for our farmers, support our farmers, and prioritize soil health. The soil is equivalent to the microbiome. The soil's not good, the microbiome's not good. Come in December, I will be speaking for Acres, which is one of the first, I think it's the first organic conference in the US. I think this is the 50th anniversary, and I'm honored to be speaking, and I'm going to be talking about this talk, educating farmers about the effects of what they do on our kids. And we have to support community supported agriculture, SNAP programs. If people get some types of food stamps in California, it's called SNAP, they can go to farmers markets and get 2 for 1 on their SNAP credits. Next, please. I want to show you, I talked about boron. Boron's key. It's one of the key. You don't hear a lot about boron, but during COVID we did. And soil depletions weaken our defense against nanomaterials. And boron is one of them. And I just had to put that in there because I've been on this boron kick lately. And so welcome to my brain. You're just having a look at my brain and what I worry about. Next, please. So we have to teach people how to read labels. That's all of us. And we have to learn about high-risk GMO crops. I've had patients tell me, In-N-Out burger and burgers and fries are fine. Their fries are super good. And I said, really? Well, they're fried in cottonseed oil. And cottonseed oil is an inflammatory seed oil, and we shouldn't be eating it. And it's also genetically modified, filled with glyphosate. And it's not for humans, not for any consumption. And of course, be mindful of what teens and women are using. And if you're using a non-organic tampon, they're filled with GMOs and pesticides that you're using several times a day for 5 days in a row over many, many decades. Think about that. I know. You have to, for your family, for Christmas, for holidays, if you do presents, give organic tampons. Next, please. I recommend a detox. We have to be detoxing because we're all being poisoned as we try and reverse the toxic assault on our food. And so we have to support liver detox pathways. There are actually 2 pathways. There are actually 3. There's an intermediate pathway, but foods high in sulfur. And my dear friend there, Dr. Seneff, knows more about sulfur and detoxification than anyone. And you heard her say that glyphosate disrupts this sulfur pathway. Eating foods high in sulfur, like onions, like garlic, super healthy. And I do prescribe lots of supplements to aid detoxification, but you can do simple Epsom salt baths. And I do a lot of detox baths for kids. And I just wrote there a little formula that I use. You don't have to use all these things, but I'm just giving you ideas from what you can adapt for your own families. Next, please. Oh, yeah, I just love that. You can't wake a person who's pretending to be asleep. Everybody has to wake up. Next, please. So we have to restore the gut health. I like to use symbiotics. Those are the food for the microbes that we're giving in the probiotic. They're called prebiotics, and together they make symbiotics. So inulin is one of their favorite foods. Inulin's what's in onion. And there's even something called postbiotics. Postbiotics are what the microbes produce. It's not the microbe themselves that are helping us. It's their metabolic products that are helping us. We want to recommend all those fermented foods. We know that cows who eat sauerkraut, yes, cows that eat sauerkraut, the sauerkraut juice, they can have their own guts restored from glyphosate exposures. And I remind you, and I've talked about this before, and I can't say it enough, babies need bifidobacteria. And glyphosate does a good job taking out bifidobacteria. And babies need a monoculture. And we've talked about this before, but mention it again here. Next, please. This is for those of you geeks who want to see the microbes and what you have to pair them with. So I wanted to include this so you can see the bottom is Akkermansia, the microbe that Dr. Stephanie discussed. And there is the prebiotics that the Akkermansia like to eat. Polyphenols, those are simply the chemicals and plants. Resistant starch. Resistant starch is, let's say you make rice and you refrigerate it and you eat it the next day. That's called a resistant starch. Same with potatoes. You eat potatoes, put them in your fridge, eat them the next day. It lowers the glycemic load and it becomes resistant to breaking down. And that restores mucosal barrier integrity amongst the many other things that Akkermansia does that you heard about earlier. Next. This could be a whole topic in itself, but every family needs to get the best system they can afford and get the pesticides and the fluoride out of your drinking water. And just do what you can. I wrote some of my favorite water systems there. Environmental Working Group has a good list on their website, but unfortunately, tap water is contaminated, often with pesticides, toxic metals, such as fluoride. Next, please. You can get your own glyphosate and its toxic byproduct AMPA. There is some labs such as hrilabs.org. And you can also check your own vitamin D because now in California, it's not being included under insurance and you have to pay $139 extra to get it checked. Or you can even order it yourself through directlabs.com. You want to see a level over 50. 50 to 75 is ideal. And so it could probably even be higher than that, especially if you're dealing with immune challenges. You want a robust vitamin D level. I showed you what a lab looks like in a kid. This is a very low level. Those are extremely low levels. Vitamin D2 is the inactive form. Vitamin D3 is the active form. So this child would be at great risk. Next, please. This is what we used to do. Remember back in the hippie days, for those of you in my age group, we would be protesting. See how far we've gotten? Here we are with all that protesting we did. Next, please. And this is where what we have to do now. Please turn off the remote, shut off Netflix, get off the couch. And it's not just Dr. Stephanie and myself and Ann Temple, our producer, doing this. This is every one of us has to become active and become a citizen scientist. And we all can do it. And we all need to study, even if it's our N of 1 or N of 4 for our own family, that we have to take action in redirecting and directing our own health, holistic health, farm to farm, and regain the terrain. Next. So these are some of the things we can do. I just put some things, as you know, Dr. Stephanie Zen-Honeycutt and I, we did the infant formula study looking at environmental heavy metals, toxic metals, pardon, aluminum's not heavy by weight. We looked at those in the infant formula. We looked at them in Girl Scout cookies along with glyphosate and AMPA, the toxic byproduct. So you all can do it. We can do it together. You don't have to be researchers. You can just simply support your local farmer and buy organic and grow your own. Grow your own herbs in your own little window boxes. Easy to do. Next, please. Yes, there are now trips you can take. Here's a leisure cruise line where you can become a citizen scientist, and these folks are going, I think, into the Arctic. So we can. There are people who are studying bees. There are scientists, citizen scientists studying bee health and bee culture. So we can all learn how to do this. Next, please. Can you reduce pesticides if you switch to organic? Yes. Kendra Klein in this study showed top 4 pesticides decrease after 1 week of an organic diet. So yes, the answer is yes. Next, please. Okay, old book, new book. I just have to keep my tushy in the chair. I got to finish it. It'll be done by the end of this year. Wrapping up some lectures. Next, please. So unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. If you like what we're doing here at the New MDs, at GMO Science, our research projects, Dr. Stephanie and I might be writing a paper soon, I hope, together. And so this work takes money, takes time, so please support us. So on that note, I think that's the last slide. If you want to stop slides. And I'm just going to, if there were any, I think any questions that are screaming for us before we jump off, and somehow I got this done by 1 o'clock. Any questions? Okay, I'm just looking through some of the questions here. Always a shout out to Dr. Stephanie. Absolutely. And yes, I love Tamara Rubin too. She was on the New MDs and she's been a champion for lead as well as other toxic metals. So please visit Lead Safe Mama. Tamara Rubin's a bomb. So on that note, Stephanie, any final comments before we wrap up and thank our listeners for joining us today? You're on mute. You're on mute, Stephanie.
Just want to say it was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. Learned something too. So that's great.
Stephanie, for you to learn something, it's not easy, but thank you for the kind words. And yes, every time Stephanie speaks, I learn something. So this is our journey. I want to say thank you. Thank everyone for attending. We'll see you next month. It's either the 3rd or 4th Tuesday, probably the third Tuesday because of Thanksgiving holiday. And please feel free to share this podcast if you liked it. Comments are always welcome. And you can reach me on GMO Science website or info@gmoscience.org. So we're signing out for now and see you all next time. Thanks, Dr. Sedef.